Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
In what many are seeing as a last-ditch move to secure a Brexit legacy, the Prime Minister has decided to go for a new parliamentary vote on her withdrawal agreement tomorrow. But as ever, there's a catch. This time, MPs will be asked to back the part of the agreement that deals only with the divorce, leaving the political declaration, which describes Britain's future relations with the EU, to another day. Our political editor, Laura Koonsberg, explains what lies behind Theresa May's latest parliamentary manoeuvre.
They won't just be talked into it. Still too many quarrels about what to do.
Mark is in a real minority here because he's
17.4 million people.
No.
Ministers still want to move forward Theresa May's compromise with the EU to end all the noise.
Politicians of all political parties have a duty to put the national interest first so that we can put this controversy behind us and move on to a brighter future for the British people.
But conversations are over for now with the allies they need, the DUP, who won't back the deal, together with a core of Brexiteers who are still holding out.
One thing I would like to see is, I think, us go back to the EU again, keep the arm of friendship open, explain that there's still time for an exchange of letters providing a legally binding exit from the backstop.
There's a trickle of Brexiteers who'll back Theresa May's deal now she's promised to leave, and they're urging colleagues to join them.
You also want to leave the EU. Guys and girls, it's up to you.
If only it were that simple for Theresa May. Tomorrow she will have another go at getting this place behind her deal. But it's not a third attempt at getting the whole package through, which has already failed twice. You might want to call tomorrow the day of meaningful vote 2.5, because MPs will only be asked to vote on the divorce deal with the European Union. They won't be asked to give another judgment on the whole package, which includes a plan for the long term. Number 10 says it's the last chance to be sure of avoiding a long delay to Brexit. But splitting up the controversial two parts might not avoid defeat.
To decouple them means you'd be asking the Labour Party to vote for a Brexit without a political declaration that tells you what the future relationship's going to look like. And that can't be right, which is why the two documents absolutely have to go together.
Even with Tories, Number 10's latest wheeze simply might not work.
We're all sharing it. That deal that's on the table has all of our names on it.
Even those who didn't back Brexit can't agree.
We've been in the EU for 45 years. We would hope that the settlement that we decide on would last us for another 50 years. It should not be one that we are held to vote for at gunpoint. I could see that there will be no majority for any of the options, and you can't easily get people to support different options because they take us to a different place.
A second referendum.
That's not the point. The point is we cannot support that deal.
The question is, the referendum doesn't settle all of the difficult choices and trade-offs that need to be made in any kind of deal that we're talking about. So saying, well, my answer to the problem of complexity is to pass a binary choice back to the people doesn't settle that one bit.
How is your party going to sort this out? You've been having this argument for nearly 3 years.
I think the solution to this lies in looking beyond the party to Parliament as a whole.
We needed a process that reached across the other side of the House of Commons and worked with the other tribes and factions and the other parties.
There are so many doubts, though, about the Prime Minister's deal getting through, whether in two halves or at the same time, that behind closed doors, MPs from all parties are hunting for solutions.
Well, I won't be voting for this half deal, and it's another outrage by the Prime Minister trying to circumvent Parliament and attempting to bash us all over the head yet again, and I don't think it will work. And that's why I'm working very closely with colleagues across parties to try and find solutions, because we need a way out of this crisis.
But Number 10 is still trying, to find an escape out of the dark hole they're in. Tomorrow they'll ask Parliament to allow them to take another step. And remember how we got here. Theresa May spent years putting this deal together with the EU, but MPs voted it down. She got a few changes or tweaks to it, and then MPs voted it down. She said last night she would quit if it meant people would back her. And now, instead of being able to put the whole thing on the table tomorrow, she's asking them essentially to turn this into a game of two halves, just voting on the first part of the deal that sorts out our departure and leaving the longer term for the next few weeks. But it's still not certain that that will even get through, because people, George, are really dug into their positions. Labour have said that they won't vote for it. Those key Northern Irish allies, the DUP, have also said tonight they won't back the government tomorrow. Where this is tricky, though, and where the government might be accused of pulling some kind of stunt, is that tomorrow, of course, was meant to be Brexit Day, the day that we have been due to leave the European Union for such a long time now. And the government tomorrow will be challenging people to vote against the idea of what was promised to the public all those months ago. And Labour had previously said they didn't have a problem with the divorce deal. They accepted the EU's verdict that it could not be renegotiated. So Number 10 are facing another very stiff test, but they hope that this move might give them another sense of momentum.
Laura, for the moment, thank you. Now, as we've heard, without a majority in the Commons, Theresa May is dependent on winning the support of Northern Ireland's DUP. Last night, they made it clear they would not back the Prime Minister's deal as it stands. Emma Vardy is at Stormont this evening, home of the Assembly of Northern Ireland. Emma, what could change the DUP's minds?
Short answer, doing away with the backstop entirely. But we've heard time and time again from Brussels that's something that they say they are not going to agree to. If the backstop were to come into force, it could mean Northern Ireland being treated differently to the rest of the UK, the thing that the DUP dislikes the most. So there have been all these other avenues explored to try to make it more palatable. First one of the big ones, the so-called Stormont lock, giving this place, the Northern Ireland Assembly, a say in whether we enter the backstop, and also promises that if Northern Ireland had to keep following EU rules, then the rest of the UK would do the same and would stand by it. But there's distrust within the DUP over whether those promises would be kept, and the party certainly doesn't want to be sold out further down the line. So another carrot dangled is giving the DUP a seat in future trade talks with the EU. But again, there's suspicions over whether the government was ever really serious at giving them a place at that table. And of course, if they did decide to do that, it would raise big questions over whether Scotland and Wales could demand the same thing. So that brings us back to the backstop. Getting the ink on the paper of the withdrawal agreement changed in a legally binding way is the thing that many in the DUP at this stage now believe is really the only thing that could genuinely get them on side. Of course, it's the thing that the EU is completely resistant to as well. Now, if you think all of this has been a headache over the past 2 years, well, rest assured, many people here in Northern Ireland would agree with you, a place which voted to remain in the referendum. But within the DUP, there's a feeling that even a long extension, maybe a couple more years of all this uncertainty, would still be preferable to voting for a deal which they believe chips away at Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom, the most fundamental thing that the party believes in.
Emma, many thanks. Now, we've reported before on the effect Brexit uncertainty has been having on British business. Well, today we had one of the starkest warnings yet. The head of the British Chambers of Commerce, Adam Marshall, couldn't have been clearer when he took aim at politicians. "You have let British business down," he said. Our business editor, Simon Jack, reports now on the impact Brexit is having on some firms.
Where do you go to escape from Brexit? How about this caravan and camping site in Dorset?
Hello.
Hi there. Pat and John headed back from Spain in time for the original Brexit date because they had so many unanswered questions.
Insurance, motorhome travelling insurance, our private medical. A big thing for us is our mobile phone roaming charges, because that's the only communications we have when we're abroad.
There's also the delays on the other side of the channel. There's also things like our driving licences that we don't know if they stack up.
And the dogs?
We don't know about how their passports stack up. We don't know about blood testing, the rabies jab.
Real questions affecting real life choices and creating some business winners and losers.
All the quality ones are German.
Campsite owner Dave is one of the few winners.
Oh, we're having a fabulous year so far. We were 300 bookings up in February on last year, and March is following suit. There's a lot of uncertainty with the economic climate and the Brexit situation. The pound is very weak against the euro. Are the ferries going to be congested with extra freight coming in if there's a no-deal situation?
It is perhaps incredible that we don't know what kind of Brexit we're going to get yet and when, but for businesses the effects of it are very real, and it's creating winners like this camping and caravan park in Dorset, but it's creating many, many more losers. For most businesses, it's that combination of caution, confusion and frustration at the political impasse that is causing real-world damage. Businesses like this one here in Portsmouth. Jane Mugridge makes fruit cordials and vinegars. Last year, she sold nearly 30,000 bottles, until bottles became one of her biggest Brexit problems.
These are our cordial bottles. The French have decided they're not going to make or supply them anymore because of the uncertainties with Brexit. That's 50% of our business out the window straight away.
Can't you get them from somewhere in the UK?
No, the British don't make pretty bottles. They make bog standard plain bottles.
What do you think politicians think about business? Do you think they recognise the needs of business?
Well, politicians don't listen to small businesses. They don't really care, I don't think.
Businesses big and small from all around the country came to Westminster today. The message was simple.
Get the deal done, remove uncertainty and lean in to investing in what is a great economy.
Finding a neat way to decouple from Europe is the key to getting business moving again. Simon Jack, BBC News.
There will be an emergency session of the House of Commons tomorrow as MPs face a crucial Brexit deadline. If they agree to Theresa May's deal by tomorrow night, Britain's exit date will be May the 22nd. If not, the country faces a no-deal exit in 2 weeks. Well, this afternoon, the government said that in an attempt to get the longer deadline, the Commons would only be asked to approve part of the withdrawal deal, with the more politically contentious plans for the future relationship left to one side. Furious opposition MPs said that they're being asked to agree to a blind Brexit. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, is with me now. Gary.
Well, people are struggling with why these two documents have been split apart. Part of it, it seems, is to get around the ruling that the Speaker was making, that the government could only put this whole thing again if it did it in a different way. Well, this is a different way. Some people in government are signalling, well, actually what this does is it leaves open the other document, which is the Declaration about the Future Relationship. It leaves that open for Parliament to muck about with it, to put its own new shape on it. I don't think that's exactly an olive branch that they're showing to Parliament. It might just be a bit of convenience, because when I asked someone else, a DUP source who's been in and out of Number 10 and the centre of power and corridors of Whitehall a lot in recent times, they said, gesturing towards Number 10, don't underestimate how much it's just falling apart in there. There is also an iconic date. They had to hit the 29th of March with something, they felt, because it has become seared into people's minds, particularly Brexit supporters, as a date of the utmost importance. And Theresa May, in that EU summit last week, apparently promised the leaders in the room that she would have the vote this week. So even though the votes don't quite seem to be there, that seems to be why it is happening tomorrow, to the surprise of some MPs who are flying back from different parts of the United Kingdom to be here, having thought the week was pretty much over. The parallel process we have going on, of course, is that sort of parallel want-to-be government. The MPs themselves, who last night did their indicative votes, they didn't exactly cover themselves in glory. Nothing actually won in the 8 options that was there. But that, as we said last night, that was probably never going to happen. What those MPs are doing now and busily over the weekend is seeing what they can put together, maybe fusing certain options to see if they can put together the people who voted for that with the people who voted for that without frightening either one. Maybe you go for a customs union with a binding referendum on the side, but that could frighten quite a lot of people in either camp. But they're still determined to come up with something next week. They're not giving up at all on that process. But the big question, of course, when you've got a big vote like this tomorrow is, will the government win? And in this world of uncertainty that we're in at the moment, I think of that we can be sure. This is going down to defeat.
Tomorrow afternoon, 8.5 hours before the moment Britain was meant to be leaving the EU, MPs will vote again on the government's Brexit deal. Yesterday, hoping to help turn things round after 2 thumping Commons defeats, Theresa May announced the clock was ticking down on her own premiership.
I think that we saw yesterday that some people did say that they were willing to support the deal, who voted against it before. But I think now it's a challenge for MPs of every political party in the House of Commons.
The Prime Minister's resignation promised to backbenchers at the 1922 committee brought some converts from the ERG pro-Brexit group. But for others, the squeeze tactic isn't working.
It backfired. The 1922 committee was a total stitch-up, but then all Tory MPs know it always is. And when the ERG met after that, Steve Baker was so angry he gave this very emotional speech, almost with tears in his eyes, about what how angry he was by what had just happened.
Good reception for that?
He was given a standing ovation.
How many people, how many are left in what's being called the Spartans?
More than enough.
24?
More than enough.
The government said passing the withdrawal agreement tomorrow was the European leaders' condition laid down for a 2-month extension of the Brexit that was meant to happen tomorrow.
We could not let the time limit expire at 11 o'clock tomorrow without allowing this House the opportunity of availing itself of that right.
MPs today were still absorbing the implications of their votes last night on 8 different Brexit options.
So the noes have it, the noes have it, the noes have it. So the noes have it, the noes have it, the noes have it. So the noes have it, the noes have it.
Which ended in all 8 being defeated. Jean-Claude Juncker's spokesman in Brussels was amongst those glued to the screen.
We counted 8 no's last night. Now we need a yes on the way forward.
Supporters of a softer Brexit are trying to work out how to get a decent majority in the Commons for one approach in another round of voting on Monday. And they're warning Brexit rebels they won't like where this is going.
Those that are dancing on the heads of pins for their purest ideological version of Brexit may really rue the day that if they force either her deal now to be dropped or a vote and it to be lost again. I think
because you guys are coming back.
Well, I think they need to recognise that there is going to be a softer Brexit if they don't get this, and tough on them.
Designed to allow the House to reconsider these matters on Monday.
Fellow Tories heckled former Minister Oliver Letwin last night as he explained how the next round of indicative votes might work.
If on Monday the House is able to reach a majority view, I think that would be in the interests of our constituents and the country.
But some of his allies believe full membership of the EU customs union could be passed by MPs next week.
We live in a democracy. If Parliament says we passed a law saying do this, then governments have to obey the law like the rest of us.
But it's really hard to see the clear path to much at all at the moment, but the clear path to a government implementing a customs union and not being brought down in a vote of no confidence perhaps by some hardline Brexiteers.
Well, if Parliament has willed it, then it's unclear why the government wouldn't do it. I mean, a government would want to do it. People are saying that, oh, well, we'd bring them down in the vote of confidence. Actually, I don't think they would, and they certainly shouldn't. If this is the will of Parliament, then any government has to obey it.
But before that, Theresa May will honour a pledge she made to EU leaders at the summit last week to put the vote here this week. The margin of defeat should shrink, but no one is expecting victory.
Well, we're joined now by Rory Stewart MP, the Minister of State for Prisons. Rory Stewart, do you think the government's going to win this tomorrow? Do ministers think they're going to win it tomorrow?
It all depends on Labour. So what's essentially happened is we've broken the problem down. Instead of talking about the future and the withdrawal agreement at the same time, we've now split them up. And given that the Labour front bench has said repeatedly that their problem is with the political declaration and not with the withdrawal agreement.
But now they're saying they're being asked to vote on a blind Brexit.
Right. So it isn't a blind Brexit because they will have every opportunity in law to vote for the political declaration, for a withdrawal agreement act, through the meaningful vote. This is just sorting out citizens' rights. This is sorting out the way the Irish border would work, and this is setting the transition period, all of which Keir Starmer and Jeremy Corbyn say they have no problem with.
Yeah, but they are the most contentious issues. The whole House is still confused about all of them.
Yes, but not the Labour front bench.
Tomorrow, just to leave with nothing else on the statute book, it does look like a blind Brexit.
So in that sense it is, John, but the Labour front bench has said again and again, and it depends how you do this kind of negotiation. If you're trying to negotiate a divorce or a civil war. You find something that you agree on, and you get that done, and then you move on to the things that you disagree on.
And what do you say to the EU, who were expecting a package of both? They would then know what your intentions were, but they don't now.
So all you have to say to the EU is that they can see as clearly as any of us does what's going on here. I don't think the EU's naive. Many of them run coalition governments. They know more about British politics than almost anyone. All we're explaining is that we're trying to take it one bite at a time.
Let's be clear, does the government absolutely rule out a no-deal Brexit? Because that could flow from this.
Well, so for me, I'm very opposed to a no-deal Brexit. But you'd
resign over it?
I have said again and again that I'm resigning over prisons, not about no-deal Brexit. But I'm very against the no-deal Brexit, as are a lot of my colleagues. I think it would be dangerous, unnecessary, damaging. This withdrawal agreement at least gets the transition period in place. It would give some sort of reassurance to businesses and let us see what happens over the next few months. Now, of course, if you don't want to leave the European Union at all, you're not going to want the withdrawal agreement. But if you want to leave with a deal, this is your best chance of getting that.
Tomorrow was supposed to be Brexit Day. Instead, you're in a complete shambles. This is no condition, a constitutional crisis, a complete breakdown of trust between MPs and the country.
Sure.
Why doesn't the government say, look, I'm sorry, we have tried, but the last 2 years have taught us that we are as divided as the rest of the country. So shall we just stay, think it all over, work it out, and maybe in 5, 10 years' time, if it becomes necessary, then perhaps we could try going again.
So, unfortunately, John, the country is as divided about your proposal as they are about anything else. So it wouldn't solve anything. We know the country is split nearly 50-50 down the middle on this issue. Simply remaining or simply going for a hard Brexit isn't going to solve this. I genuinely believe the only way to solve this is to try to find a pragmatic compromise. If we have a 52-48 vote, we need a 52-48 result. And the only way of doing that is to try to stay close to the European economically, but leave the political institutions. I'm afraid that just pretending the thing didn't happen isn't going to solve the deep divisions in British society.
So far, we've spoken on the basis that you win tomorrow. But if you lose, this will be an even bigger crisis.
But, John, there's no doubt it's an enormous crisis. There's no doubt there are probably...
Well, what do you do? What happens if you lose tomorrow? What is the threat you're offering the opposition?
I would continue to argue again and again for a very moderate, practical... compromise Brexit. It's the only way of getting through this, because otherwise you face a binary choice.
Forgive me, the government wouldn't have done this if they haven't worked out what will happen if they lose.
So, if we lose, we have to get into other conversations. But I don't think we need to lose on this, because this isn't where we disagree with Labour. This is where we disagree. I mean, for people, and there'll be many people watching this, who are real Remainers and who wish this whole thing never happened, in which case they're not interested in any kind of Brexit deal. They're not going to want this thing to go through tomorrow. But the Labour front bench and the Conservative front bench have the position that we accept the referendum and we want a deal. We want a deal, we all agree on the agreement, get that done, and then we can talk about the details later.
Yes or no, Mrs May is bound to leave pretty soon now. Are you a candidate?
Am I a candidate? I don't think I have much more chance of being a Tory candidate than you, John, at the moment.
Sounds as if more or less everybody in the Tory party has a chance.
Yes, we might as well all run at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Laura Stewart. We'll be back later, but for now, it's back to Matt in the studio. Matt.
Thanks, John. Well, joining me now by Skype from Dublin is the Irish MEP and Vice President of the European Parliament, Mairead McGuinness. Mairead McGuinness, I can see part of you, but not all of you. Can you hear me?
Well,
okay.
Maybe part of me has just given up, but I hope you can see me now.
Okay, jolly good. We'll press ahead. So, Theresa May described herself rather boastingly as a bloody difficult woman. Will you miss her?
Well, she's not gone yet, so let's not write her off. I certainly won't miss the uncertainty that we've all lived through, you included, since 2016 and the referendum. We thought last week was traumatic. I think this week has been particularly traumatic because tomorrow was to be the day, the 29th of March, and many of us had cleared our diaries just in honour or even to respect that momentous occasion. And now we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. The House of Commons is back again. There will be a vote, but I'm hearing your experts say that it hasn't a chance of going through the withdrawal agreement. It won't get the support. And I suppose then we do have another scenario. If the withdrawal agreement is rejected, as you know, the leaders of Europe have said the next deadline is April the 12th. And maybe that will focus minds from Monday and Tuesday onwards. However, It hasn't focused minds to date, so I'm not really sure how this is going to play out. We still are very concerned of an accidental crash-out, no-deal Brexit.
OK. Mairead McGuinness, I'm afraid we're going to have to end the interview there because we can literally only see half of your face, your chin, and we'd like to see all of it, frankly.
Can you see me now?
No, we can see even less of you. OK, I'm going to leave it there. But another time. Mairead McGuinness, thank you very much indeed. There we go. OK.
Where tomorrow MPs will get another chance to vote on the Prime Minister's deal, or at least part of it. One of its fiercest critics has been Jacob Rees-Mogg, the old Etonian whose plummy tones lacerated the withdrawal agreement for turning us into what he said would be a vassal state. But he has wobbled on whether to back it in recent days. Andy Davis went to find out what voters in his Somerset constituency make of the Brexit crisis, and also caught up with the work of another key figure of our times from the West Country.
In the Bristol Museum and Art Gallery today, democracy in the shape of an ape was back on show.
I think it represents the complete ongoing farce that we've had to endure since the referendum. So yeah, I think it's perfect.
Banksy's devolved Parliament, on loan 10 years on from its unveiling here, and its impish, chimpish tableau was prompting inevitably some beastly political comparisons.
I think it's a very good depiction of this current situation.
Do you?
Yes, I do.
In what way?
Because our current MPs have been treated like a crowd of monkeys, not being allowed to do their job for the last 3 years. Sit in your hands, keep your mouth shut, and the ones at the head of government are the only ones allowed a say.
Aren't they having their say, all of them, at the moment?
At the moment, yes, but it's taken 3 years. In those 3 years, we should have moved ahead with an awful lot of other things that our country really needed.
Are you feeling more optimistic about the political process, given the developments over the last few days, or more pessimistic?
Pessimistic, I think.
I'm optimistic in that we might actually get rid of this government, which I think could only be good. So in a way, I'm optimistic.
Several miles away in Keynsham, we're in the constituency of Brexiteer Silverback Jacob Rees-Mogg. At a coffee morning, not short of Brexit fatigue.
Sick of hearing about it, to be honest. It's all over the news every day, day in, day out. And surely there's lots of other more important stuff we can all be talking about.
And sentiments too, echoing those in Westminster who view this latest apparent deadlock in terms of a constitutional crisis. Who do you think's in charge at the moment in Westminster?
No one. Nobody, I don't think. I don't know who's in charge. Maybe that's the problem in general, is that we need a redo of how Parliament works, maybe, and that the structure isn't probably where it should be for today's day and age. I imagine that the way things go are based on age-old system, and maybe that age-old system just isn't the best way to do things in today's modern world. Maybe we need a redo.
Amidst plans for a new vote tomorrow on Theresa May's withdrawal agreement, the recent softening of vehement opposition to her proposal from the likes of local MP Jacob Rees-Mogg hasn't gone unnoticed here.
Well, he's a two-timer, isn't he? I mean, that's all I could say about him. I mean, how can you trust anyone? It changes their mind like the wind.
I can see his point of view because he feels that the way he wants Brexit is just not going to go through, and therefore he's now prepared to accept a much softer Brexit, which is a shame, but that's better than nothing at all.
As for Parliament's latest efforts to break the impasse with indicative votes, few here seemed enthused.
Are you asking about last night's fiasco? Well, it's just another set of, how can I say, disasters with it, isn't it? I mean, there's no step forward at all, is there? It just seems to be a case of getting nowhere fast.
The whole thing's just embarrassing, isn't it? The whole thing is embarrassing. We look like an embarrassment.
So what needs to happen then? Should there be a general election? Some people are calling.
I don't think that's any good either. How can we have a general election at this point? I think Parliament just kind of needs to find a way to come together.
Do you think there should be a general election?
Well, what are we going to get at what we've got at the moment? Who's going to come in and save us, you know, from all of this? Who?
Who indeed? Back at the gallery, they called it a timely chance to revisit this Banksy work. On display for 5 months, but they're not ruling out an extension.
Andy Davis. Now, earlier I spoke with the Conservative MP and ERG member Andrew Bridgen and the Labour MP Rishanara Ali. I began by asking Andrew Bridgen if he would vote for the withdrawal agreement tomorrow.
I won't, and separating it from the political declaration actually makes it more unlikely that I think thinking Conservatives would support the government tomorrow. It actually makes it harder to vote for because the withdrawal agreement refers to the political declaration. The withdrawal agreement would be very hard to get out the backstop. Without the political declaration, it's almost impossible.
We rarely agree with each other, but on this one, many MPs from different ends of the political spectrum will be voting against the withdrawal agreement. And actually, what the government's doing is being incredibly sly, as usual, trying to find yet another route to reintroduce the opportunity for Theresa May to get the withdrawal agreement through and get her deal through that way. And that is not in the spirit of what was promised. I mean, the future relationship is not entirely clear anyway, but now she's taking away the document that sets out provides some sense of what that future relationship might be.
Well, let's just start doing the maths. I mean, how many other people think like you on your end of the spectrum?
I suspect there's probably 15 or 20 Conservatives, and we're hearing the DUP aren't going to support it.
But, Rishanara Ali, how did you vote last time on the combined deal that Mrs May put forward?
I voted against it because this transition deal is going to make the UK economy smaller. People will still lose their jobs under that deal. We're not going to be any better off.
This has done nothing to change your mind.
And this is doing nothing. It's actually doing nothing to improve the situation. It's just a manifestation of Theresa May and her government driving the country insane, frankly, by not listening to what we need. We need a compromise. Yesterday we had the opportunity to have the indicative votes. Only one day. The next stage is to look at the most popular options, and they were a confirmatory vote, which would allow the option of her deal and other options that have been voted for, including the option to remain in.
Right.
That's the next stage that we need to focus on.
Well, presumably, if she loses tomorrow, that is it. She really has to go.
I'm hearing that there might be a thought they might bring it back again next week.
What, as a combined thing?
I've no idea. It sounds like a withdrawal agreement for just when you thought it was safe to go back into the chamber.
Do you see the Speaker's hand in all this?
The Speaker is the chair, and he is responsible for making sure that the government doesn't abuse its powers, and it has been so far.
There is a power vacuum. The Speaker's trying to fill it, but what he's actually doing is driving a coach and horses straight through our Constitution. The Speaker is making the rules up as he goes along. We've got a Parliament that will not let us leave the European Union. My preferred option is that we leave on no deal, end the uncertainty for business and everyone else on the 12th of April. I don't think this Parliament will...
That would cause absolute chaos.
So what the Speaker has done is to trigger an election, effectively, in your mind?
No, the Speaker is grandstanding. He's going to finish very shortly, and he's enhancing his earning capacity on the speaking circuit.
Nevertheless, what he's done
and he's putting our whole Constitution at risk. That's what he's doing. He's a grandstander.
They've just had it in for the Speaker for many years, and this is another sign of it. What's problematic is this government and this Prime Minister, who doesn't give a monkeys about people's lives and livelihoods. She doesn't respect Parliament. She doesn't respect the will of Parliament.
The economy's doing really well.
And by the way, the ERG, the European Research Group, and Andrew's lot, they promise frictionless trade. They promise that you can have your cake and eat it. The country will be better off, but instead people are losing jobs.
Well, I think we could end on the observation that we've moved from a shambles to a shambles.
And well, out of chaos, hopefully will come order. But what we've got is a Speaker who is supposed to be the umpire, but wants to be the opening batsman and the opening bowler as well.
And you believe order can only come from an election?
Well, no, I think order can come from what parliamentarians decide next week, whether they're prepared to compromise, whether members of parliament can come up with a deal, come up with an approach that protects our economic interests. And I believe that we can do that with supporting the motions, the two most popular motions, customs union, as well as the confirmatory vote. There is an opportunity to look at those motions and look at building something around that and a compromise around that. And I think there is an opportunity to do that.
A parliament that doesn't does not represent the will of the British people with regard to Brexit. And we've got Labour MPs who are betraying their trust that they've placed in them by a lot of Labour Leave voters.
Members of Parliament's mandate. That is unhelpful.
We gave the people the right to decide on the referendum.
On that note, alas, I'm sorry.
Against us.
Krishnara Ali and Andrew Bridgen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you. Tonight's main news: MPs are to vote again on Brexit tomorrow, but only one part of the deal negotiated by the Prime Minister with the EU. It's emerged that Jeremy Corbyn has spoken for 20 minutes on the phone with Mrs May this afternoon. His spokesman said he spelled out his opposition to her last-ditch attempt to separate the political declaration from the withdrawal agreement, saying he will not agree to a blindfold Brexit.
In a week when we've lived through vote after vote to try to carve any sort of path out of the Brexit crisis, this afternoon we learned there will be yet another one tomorrow. It is both highly significant and far from straightforward. Summoned to sit on Friday, the Commons will yet again try to work out if it can back the Prime Minister. But they will only consider the divorce part of her deal, the withdrawal agreement, and not the part which looks at our future relationship with the EU. So it is not strictly a meaningful vote. Well, tonight the omens are not looking good for her. The DUP say they won't back it, and Labour said it would lead to the blindest of Brexits, vowing to oppose it as well.
Parliament will have another chance to disappoint the anti-Brexit brigade, but it's more likely to be government ministers who are feeling blue this time tomorrow. They're planning to squeeze in another vote on Brexit just before the EU's deadline for delaying it until May.
In agreeing tomorrow's motion, we will trigger the automatic extension to Article 50 to May the 22nd, and if we don't agree the withdrawal agreement tomorrow, then we will not.
And as tomorrow's vote will only be on the withdrawal agreement part of the Prime Minister's deal, this time the Speaker allowed it.
I am pleased to report to the House that the Government's motion for tomorrow's debate complies with the tests set out.
There are, of course, two parts to Theresa May's Brexit deal: a withdrawal agreement on the terms of separation and a political declaration outlining the future relationship. The EU says if the withdrawal agreement passes through Parliament tomorrow, Brexit can be delayed until the 22nd of May. If not, then as things stand, Brexit is on the 12th of April, even with no deal. Labour doesn't object quite so strongly to the withdrawal agreement, but if this is aimed at winning their support, it's not really working.
We've already complained that this is a blind Brexit. Yesterday, the Prime Minister threw in that she's going to stand down, so it's even more blind because we don't know who the new Prime Minister is going to be. And now, if she separates the political declaration off, it's completely blind because we've no idea where we're going. So the idea that you can split them is just not going to work.
Yesterday's promise from the Prime Minister to quit if the deal goes through may have persuaded a few more Tories to pedal in her direction, most notably Boris Johnson. But many more won't vote for that insurance policy meant to keep the Irish border open, the backstop, and that is included in tomorrow's vote.
Frankly, I can't see me wanting to vote for that. I can't even see the DUP wanting to vote for that.
No, there's been nothing has happened overnight or today that has changed our position on the withdrawal agreement, which we still find problems with over the Irish backstop protocol, and it still causes problems for colleagues across the House.
So not even Mrs May's predecessor can quite tell who she is trying to persuade.
The basic problem is that Parliament is stuck. There are four groups in Parliament: people who want the Prime Minister's deal, people who want no deal, people who want a second referendum, and people who want a softer Brexit. And the government has to try and find a way of getting at least two of those groups to work together.
And if the government can't, MPs like Margaret Beckett will try.
Oh, good, good.
On Monday, they want to have another series of votes to see what Parliament can support.
How will that work? Will you be whittling down the number of options?
Yes, I think there's general acceptance, and that's why we had stage one, so that everybody could put up their ideas to see what would attract the most support. And then you try to see whether you can come to more common ground among the things that attracted more support.
Ministers hope that with MPs now so focused on the future relationship, they might be more persuadable on the withdrawal agreement. And then, of course, there is tomorrow's date. At this point tomorrow night, we should have been entering our final hour as EU members. We won't be, and ministers hope MPs will have a good hard think about that overnight.
Carl Dinnan News at 10, Westminster.
So with the government trying to meet the EU's deadline for withdrawal agreement to pass this week, what do they make of it all then in Brussels? Let's cross to our Europe editor, James Mates, who is there. Clearly this being driven by that deadline set at last week's summit. James, what do you have for us from there?
Well, yes, indeed. The deadline is on everyone's mind. At that summit, they said pass the withdrawal agreement. Britain leaves with a deal on May the 22nd. As Carl was explaining, if it isn't passed, then it's April the 12th with no deal. It's not completely clear that this ruse, if you can put it that way, of splitting the withdrawal agreement from the political declaration would actually meet those conditions. There have been legal opinions both ways today, though the truth is that no one really expects it to pass, so no one's expending too much energy on it. If no deal is to be avoided on April the 12th, there is the possibility of this longer extension, but on two conditions. One, that Britain takes part in the European elections. Two, that it comes up with a plan for the future. Now, interestingly, on this extension issue, the Commission here, which has run all these negotiations, is handing this now firmly to the other 27 capitals, which means, of course, that Berlin and Paris are going to be the big decision makers there. It seems that on that plan for the future, well, they're not going to be too strict. More or less any indication to try a different approach or to have a general election will pass muster. But on the European elections, Paris in particular is going to be very, very strict. They say Britain must do this pretty quickly, commit to doing it, largely because they are worried about what will happen if Britain uses its power to revoke very late on, after the elections are passed, putting all these institutions here in some legal jeopardy if there are no British MEPs and we're still a member.
OK, James, thank you for that. And Robert has joined me here in the studio. Is there any sense that the numbers might stack up for her on this partial vote?
So whips are putting enormous pressure on rebel Tory MPs tonight to change their minds and back the Prime Minister, but my estimate, talking to sources this evening, is that there will probably around 30 Brexiter Tory MPs who will vote against her withdrawal agreement. It is the essence of the deal, so I think we can say this is a very important vote. And then maybe another 5 to 10 Remainy Tories who will vote against. DUP, we know, could be an extraordinary last-minute change of heart, but tonight they told me they were definitely going to vote against. So it all comes down to how many Brexity Labour MPs the Prime Minister can persuade to join her. Let's be clear, the fact that she is going raises the risk for Labour MPs that the person who takes over will be a much more pro-extreme, in their view, Brexit leader, and therefore even if you are a Labour MP who would rather get Brexit through, you probably don't want Boris Johnson negotiating the next phase. So I don't think she'll get much more than about 10 Labour MPs. What does that mean? She loses.
OK, it's a totemic day, we should add that too into the mix,
Yeah.
But then if she loses on this totemic day, what happens next?
So on Monday, we will get the second phase of backbench MPs trying to take control of the Brexit process. We'll see another series of votes on routes through this mess. The two most popular routes identified yesterday were a customs union for a sort of permanent membership of the customs union, or a referendum, a people's vote. I don't think, when it comes to Monday's vote, that the referendum will get over the line. The customs union might. There are quite a lot of Tories who are talking about backing it more strongly on Monday. We'll just have to wait and see. I mean, my own view at the moment is it is a catastrophic mess. James was talking about the mood in the EU to possibly give us a long extension. I also have sources over there who say that they are increasingly of the view that there will be a no-deal Brexit. And there are plenty of people here close to the Prime Minister who tell me if she's confronted with a long extension or a no-deal on April the 12th, she will plump for no deal on April the 12th.
OK, Robert, thank you.
Matt Fryer.